Mr. Bees, Mr. Bees, Mr. Bees, history. Now then, people, as the Germany paper is nearly upon us, I thought I'd better do a little bit to help you with that revision thing. So today what we're going to do is going to look at how Adolf Hitler goes from being Chancellor of Germany in January 1933 to complete and total dictator, Führer, leader, dominator of Germany by August 1934. So let's crack on. Right then, just a brief recap as to how Hitler took the Nazi Party from being the smallest party in the Reichstag in 1928 to being the largest in 1933, and Hitler being appointed Chancellor by President Hindenburg. And I want you to think of the following letters: WEAPS. Germany weeps when Hitler becomes Chancellor. So the W is for the weakness of the Constitution, the Weimar Constitution, which means that proportional representation means that there's a very unstable and almost ever-changing series of governments, because no single political party is able to enjoy a majority government. In the 14 years in the existence of the Weimar Republic, there are 20 governments. So this weakness enables Hitler to become the last standing alternative, that they haven't yet tried to form a stable government in Germany. Economic collapse. Before 1929 and the Wall Street crash, Hitler had written Mein Kampf. He told people what he wanted to do. He was a gifted speaker. He had the SA who were supporting him in beating up political opponents, but nobody listened. 12 seats is all that the Nazis managed in 1928. But after 1928, the Wall Street crash in 1929 means that desperate German people look for desperate alternatives. And you see a rise in the support for the Communist Party, and you see a significant rise in the number of votes for the Nazi Party. So much so there's 6.2 million Germans unemployed, desperately seeking help. And you might think that unemployed workers would go towards the Communist Party by its very nature, a working class political party. But one of the reasons why the Nazis are so successful is that they appeal to large numbers of Germans. They use very targeted campaigns. So for people unemployed and their families, they talk about work and bread. Vote Nazi, get a job, get some food. For farmers, they appeal by saying blood and soil, which is a stark contrast to the Communist Party, who would take farms off individual farmers and collectivise them. Despite all of that, when the Nazi Party becomes the largest single party in Germany in 1932 with 230 deputies in the Reichstag, Hitler still is not asked to be Chancellor. It's only when they run out of options that von Papen finally persuades Hindenburg that they can control Hitler and that Hitler could be a figurehead Chancellor whilst von Papen's sort of people run the government. And so, as I've just said, politicians scheming is a reason why Hitler is able to be appointed Chancellor. And just to make the S, it's not in chronological order, I apologise for that, but I wanted a word you could remember, and that's strong arm tactics. There are, by the end of the 1932, there are nearly 2 million SA brown shirts who are used to intimidate opposition. In the 1932 general election, there are literally tens, if not hundreds, of riots and many, many murders of political opponents. So, why does Hitler become Chancellor as a recap? The weakness of Weimar, economic collapse, the skillful appeal of the Nazi Party, both Hitler as a speaker and their propaganda campaign, the scheming politicians, which I think is the final straw which gets Hitler into power, and his strong armed tactics. Okay, so Hitler becomes Chancellor in January 1933. What did people in Germany and around the world think of at the time? Well, common perception, certainly from Britain, was that as this famous temporary triangle cartoon where you have Hitler, who is supported by Hindenburg and von Papen, showing that von Papen and Hindenburg together have hoisted Hitler into power. Hitler looks very unhappy about it. Hindenburg, von Papen uncomfortable. And you have the ominous brown shirts in the background. It's a temporary triangle. Did the British artist Bernard Partridge think it was temporary because Hitler would use it to gain power by using dictatorial power? Or was it that von Papen and Hindenburg would tire of Hitler and dump him? And this very much less well-known cartoon, the driving school Hugenberg. Hugenberg is the leader of one of the other right-wing democratic parties in Germany. He's economics minister in Hitler's government. And you have this idea that Hitler's think he's in charge, but Hugenberg and von Papen have real control. So there's two perceptions of Hitler in January 1933. One, that this is a temporary arrangement, and two, that people at the time think that he can be controlled. Okay, then, we've seen how Hitler has become Chancellor in January 1933, and now we're going to move on to see how it takes not even one calendar month for him to move from legally elected and appointed Chancellor to effective dictator. The first event is that on the 27th of February 1933, the German Parliament building burns down. A Dutch communist, Marius van der Lubbe, is arrested and admits that he set fire to the building. Hitler uses this event to persuade Hindenburg on the day after to grant Hitler emergency powers, because he tells Hindenburg that this is the first step in a potential communist revolution. As a result of these emergency powers, Hitler has 4,000 communists arrested and the press is censored. What the German press can say is highly limited, which is important in the run-up to an election that happens only a few days later on the 5th of March. And in that election, the Nazis dominate by winning 288 seats in the Reichstag. Not quite an overall majority, but a significant increase. Then, through various political schemes, on the 24th of March, they passed the Enabling Act. The Enabling Act is essentially changing the Weimar Constitution, which says now that the Chancellor can rule by decree for an initial period of 4 years, that effectively Hitler can act like a dictator. And he manages to do that because of an increased number of Nazis in the Reichstag, because of the support of other right-wing conservative political parties, by the exclusion of all communists from the vote, and the intimidation and exclusion of many members of the SDP. No, I was right first time, SPD. Which means that Hitler is able to achieve a 2/3 majority to transform the constitution. So he becomes effective dictator for 4 years. So look at that, 27th of February to the 24th of March, biff, baff, bosh, Hitler is now effective dictator. However, there are still some limitations, which means this initial dictatorship could be rolled back. He could be dismissed by Hindenburg. There is a danger of a trade union movement-based general strike, which effectively brought down the Kapp Putsch of 1920 after a 4-day general strike. So there's a danger from working class trade unions. There should still be elections, and perhaps the German people might turn against Hitler and vote him out of power. And he could potentially be overthrown by the more socialist radical elements of his brown shirts, the SA, or, if they feel threatened, of the German army. So by the 24th of March, Hitler is a dictator, but there are still a few potential obstacles for him to establish complete, total, solid dictatorship. Or to put it another way, where had Hitler got to by March 1933 and what was still stopping him? Well, as we've seen, President Hindenburg could potentially dismiss him. The Reichstag, the parliament, still existed, and state parliaments in the German federal constitution had a significant amount of power, so they could have stopped him. Constitution would stop him being a dictator. The German people could vote him out of power. Other political parties, probably most likely the communists, if they could join together with the left-wing socialists, might pose a big problem. The SA, 2 million SA in January 1933, could have the power to stop and even kill Hitler. The army might stop the Nazis, fearing that the SA would dominate them. And the trade unions could potentially bring down Hitler as they had brought down Wolfgang Kapp in 1920. So, we've seen his emergency powers. We've seen that communists have been arrested. And in February 1933, they are banned. Nazis gain seats, and then they have the Enabling Act, which leads to the fact that state parliaments are closed down effectively in March 1933, so that there is only the Reichstag, there is only central government, there is only really Adolf Hitler. So where we get to by the end of March 1933 is many of these things that were obstacles to Hitler have already been overcome, but there's still some things that could stop him. Moving on then, how does Adolf Hitler go about becoming dictator between April 1933 and August 1934, when he was Führer, leader, ultimate dictator? So let's see what other things Hitler does. He bans all trade unions on the 2nd of May 1933. If there's no trade union action, at least not a Nazi-approved one, then a general strike is much less likely to happen. So he's removed that as a problem. On the 14th of July, he passes a law, as good as the Enabling Act allows him, to ban all other political parties, so that they won't be able to stop him anymore because they don't exist. In June 1934, Hitler purges, i.e. kills, Ernst Röhm and other leaders of the brown shirts, the SA, in what's called the Night of the Long Knives. Röhm had become increasingly aggressive towards Hitler, believing that the Nazis required a second revolution led by Röhm, and Hitler could no longer stand that threat. So surreptitiously on the night of June 1934, many of those leaders were killed. That's the SA out of the way. And then, as luck would have it for Hitler, Paul von Hindenburg dies in August 1934. Hitler combines the power of chancellor, or the enhanced chancellorship that he already has, and president, to declare himself Führer. So Hindenburg's no longer an obstacle. We have two left. On the 19th of August 1934, Hitler asks the German people, are you okay with me being Führer? Obviously, there's a lot of pressure. Obviously, there's a lot of propaganda. Obviously, there's no real alternative. But even so, 90% of Germans vote to approve Hitler becoming dictator. So the threat of the German people stopping him has effectively been removed. And then finally, following both the death of Hindenburg and the German vote in the referendum, the army has a new oath, and rather than swearing to uphold the rule of law and the German constitution, they swear an oath of direct and personal loyalty to Hitler. So that by this time, in August 1934, Hitler has removed all of those obstacles to him becoming dictator, and he is finally, utterly, irrevocably dictator of Germany. Okay, so Hitler becoming dictator, Führer of Germany, could be a question in virtually any part of the Germany paper. If you want the main reason, I think there are probably three. One would be the luck caused by the Reichstag fire. Two would be the skill with which Hitler exploited that event in getting Hindenburg to grant him emergency powers and how he used them. And then thirdly, how he engineered the vote for the Enabling Act to become effective dictator. And then from that point, really, I can't see Hitler being the sort of person he was that anyone could stop him. But it is possible you could get a question on Hitler about how convincing is this source about the establishment of a Nazi dictatorship. So here you have a British cartoon, another Bernard Partridge cartoon, published 3 days after the Nazis win, get 288 seats in the Reichstag, just over a week after the Reichstag fire on the 27th of February. So if we look at that, this is a sort of guidance on how you answer these questions. Use your own knowledge to confirm or disagree with aspects of this cartoon. So let's have a look at the details. What has and has not happened? So the Reichstag fire has happened. Hitler has had emergency powers. 4,000 communists have been elected and there has been the March election. But as yet, there's no Enabling Act, no Night of the Long Knives, no opposition or trade union band, and Hindenburg is alive and kicking. So applying that chronological knowledge to that cartoon helps you understand where we are in the story of Hitler's movement from chancellor through to dictator. So let's look at the details. You can see the Reichstag building burning. That's convincing because it happened on the 27th of February. So if it's convincing, I've put it in purple. What's the red peril? Well, you have the threat of a communist uprising. A Dutch communist, Marius van der Lubbe, was arrested for starting the fire. Hitler used the threat of a communist revolution to be granted emergency powers. So yes, that's convincing. The two main figures in their relative roles, Hindenburg and Hitler, accurate. Whether that's convincing or not, I don't know. What Hitler is holding the emergency powers granted to him by Hindenburg, which he uses to arrest 4,000 communists and reduce press freedom. So yes, that bit's convincing. Who is encouraging the others to use the emergency powers? What's less convincing about this cartoon is the encouragement with which Hindenburg is getting Hitler to become a dictator. Because proud Paul von Hindenburg, president of the Weimar Republic, is the ultimate say, is the ultimate power. And so and the fact that Hitler had to persuade Hindenburg to be granted these powers, and these powers were temporary, I think suggests that actually that bit is much less convincing. If it was, then Hindenburg could have effectively made Hitler a dictator by emergency decree using Article 48, but he never did. What's the overall message? The Reichstag fire provides Hitler with an opportunity to become dictator. Yes, it does. But it is less convincing in the way in which it portrays Hindenburg as encouraging Hitler. So overall, largely convincing in terms of what has happened up to March 1933. Less convincing about the role of Hindenburg, President Hindenburg. Less convincing because it doesn't show any other steps towards dictatorship. So there's no hint about an act of parliament, an enabling act, banning of trade unions, although perhaps that is hinted at with those emergency powers. So lots of things you could talk about there. Talking about it's convincing. Put 3 of them down, whether it's convincing or unconvincing, and then you will, of course, get a splendid 8 marks and do brilliantly well in your exam. As ever, people, I hope you found that useful. Good luck with your revision. Good luck with your exam. Think carefully. Know some stuff. Use it, and use it specifically to answer the question. If you want any more help, you can leave any comments below this video, or you can email me at mrbshistory1832@gmail.com. Thank you very much, and good luck.